What do we mean by ecocide? Quite simply, the destruction of ecosystems, just as homicide is killing a person or genocide is destroying a people. Ecocide of all kinds has been committed relentlessly and repeatedly over many decades by some of the world's biggest corporations, leading inexorably to the global climate and ecological emergency we find ourselves in. Ecocide is in fact a root cause of the existential crisis humanity is facing. And right now, unlike genocide, it is still for the most part permitted by law. We all know you can't go to a government and get a permit to slaughter people for your new business. Killing people is criminal. But you can ask for a permit to open a mine, or to frack for oil and gas, or to engage in industrial fishing of the kind that destroys entire swathes of the seabed. You can destroy soil and insect ecosystems with toxic pesticides. You can chop or burn down rainforests with impunity. Clearly, it's time to change the rules. In our dominant Western culture, we draw the moral line using criminal law. And it's criminal law that is missing with regard to ecocide. There are thousands of environmental regulations in place around the world, but corporations just treat them as complications to be worked around. They might adjust their budgets for new regulations to allow for more court cases or compensation claims, but they don't change their behavior. Why? Because it's easier and more profitable not to. There is no enforceable deterrent in place to prevent the mass damage and destruction of nature. But there can be. And it's actually very simple, almost laughably simple. Make ecocide a crime. Creating personal, individual criminal responsibility for key decision makers. This is not about ordinary citizens going about their lives. It's about decisions that are made at the highest levels of government and industry. No CEO wants to be seen or prosecuted as a criminal. Banks cannot finance criminal activity. Insurers can't underwrite it. Government ministers can't issue permits for it. So how can this be done? There is a straightforward, effective way to make ecocide a crime on a global scale, and that is by amending the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, or ICC for short. The ICC is really interesting because of how it works. It's the only global mechanism which directly accesses the already existing criminal justice systems of all its member states. If you make something a crime at the ICC, any member state ratifying that crime must include it in their own domestic legislation. So it's by far the most efficient way to create a coherent law across borders. And this is fundamentally important with environmental crimes, as the worst offenders are huge transnational corporations. Once again, ecocide, in our view, is not about individual pollution events at the level of ordinary citizens. It's about the wholesale and systematic destruction of nature as part of corporate or political practice in full awareness of the risks. The Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court governs the most serious crimes of concern to the international community as a whole. Currently, these are genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and more recently added, the crime of aggression. Now we know, because now we can plainly see, that there are in reality deeply serious consequences to destroying ecosystems. We are seeing these consequences playing out in ever more apocalyptic ways. Fires, floods, droughts, hurricanes, poisoned air, depleted soils, contaminated waters. These multiple crises are extinguishing species at unprecedented speed and taking us towards, and in some cases already over, tipping points which threaten the very existence of human civilization. So ecocide is already in reality a crime of most serious concern to the international community as a whole. It simply isn't listed on that statute. Not yet. But the process for amending the Rome Statute is actually quite simple. Any member state can propose it, and a simple majority can put it on the table for discussion. For adoption into the statute, 2/3 of members must support the amendment. Now, the ICC is a one-state, one-vote forum like the UN, but unlike the UN, there's no Security Council, no state has the power to veto an amendment. Once it's on the table, it's simply a matter of time to accumulate the collective support. So once it's on the table, the writing is on the wall. And the steps of the amendment process create almost by default a kind of compliance period. The law may not be here yet, but we can all see it coming. Corporations need time to reevaluate their practices, and governments need time to put in place the right transition policies to help with compliance in respect of this new ground rule. So it is important that this law does not appear overnight. They need time, but not too much time. The COVID pandemic has shown how quickly action can be taken when it's needed. Investors, insurers, CEOs and policymakers already know that drastic changes are needed if humanity is to thrive into the future. Ecocide law is the simple course correction that can support those changes. It can level the corporate playing field and enable the many solutions that are out there, from regenerative farming to renewable energy to circular economy, to begin to truly engage, while providing a guardrail for those who need it to guide them back towards safe practices. And as any entrepreneur knows, there is nothing like a clear parameter for unleashing innovation and creativity. Our work focuses exclusively on helping to make this law a reality at the international level. And it is happening. Over the last 2 years, we've discovered just how many dots were waiting to be joined, with campaigners, with international criminal lawyers, with politicians, diplomats, faith leaders and influencers. In November 2019, Pope Francis called for ecocide to be made an international crime. The following month, small island states, or perhaps I should say great ocean states, Vanuatu and the Maldives, officially asked for ICC member states to consider amending the Rome Statute to include ecocide. President Macron of France and the new Belgian government have officially declared support, and parliamentary motions have been submitted in Sweden. In Spain, the government has been asked by its Foreign Affairs Committee to examine legislating for ecocide, both nationally and internationally. Finland, Canada, and Luxembourg have all expressed interest, and the EU has voted to encourage member states to recognise ecocide. Our foundation has now convened a panel of top international criminal lawyers to draft a robust legal definition of ecocide that can be considered for proposal at the ICC by interested states. And we're already in dialogue with parliamentarians from an additional 12 countries who are eagerly awaiting the resulting definition. We have campaign teams and associate groups in more than a dozen countries and websites in 9 languages. But ultimately, it's not even about our particular work. It's about a global conversation. And it's fundamentally about a concept, this relatively new word ecocide, which encapsulates something, the terrible extent of damage that we all perceive to be happening to the natural living world in so many different ways. The moment we understand the word, we intuitively know it to be both dangerous and morally wrong. It's a small but essential step from acknowledging that understanding to calling for it to be reflected in law. Together, we can all take that step, and we can call for it in our own countries as well as on the international stage. This is a foundational and obvious law to put in place. It protects everything we love and hold dear, everything that sustains us. It protects the future of life on Earth. Thank you.